Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen, it's that time, so we'll get started. Item 1, I've got apologies from Councillor Grimmadale, Councillor Webb and Councillor Graves. Any other apologies?
Councillor Eldrick, Chair.
Councillor Eldrick, thank you. I have no late items. We don't have any petitions, I don't believe. No. Identification of urgent items which calling will not apply. I understand that agreement has been made with Scrutiny Chair that item 9, the council tax base, will not be subject to calling. Items of declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, please? Okay, I'm interested. My phone's going off. Minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of December. Can we have a proposer, please? Councillor Smell, seconder. Councillor Barker. Thank you. Item 7, recommendations from the Exec Scrutiny Board. We have an appendix circulated. Comments on some of the items. I propose to deal with them in the normal manner and raise them at the time of each individual item, if that's okay. Super. Recommendations from the Children and Young People's Board, item 8. Who's going to lead on this? Will that be you, Andy? Or?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to say thank you very much for the recommendations from the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board, and to say that we're already doing this. I had a report come to me, to my meetings previously, and I've requested a full review to be done that not only covers off-rolling but also covers exclusions and seclusions as well, so I can assure the CYP Scrutiny Board that this is already happening. If they're happy to accept that.
Thank you. So I think this is an issue to various degrees around the country in various schools, which has raised some attention nationally and somewhat locally. So if we're already in process, then there's no problem with agreeing the recommendations. If we go okay with that? It's an important aspect of this. Any comments? Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Just for clarity, I thank the Cabinet member for giving that explanation that that's already contained within her area of work that she's undertaken. But just to be clear, that the second recommendation was that we'd requested that to come back to the board once any work had been compiled into a report, just to ask if that would be okay, please.
Thank you, Chair. The calculation of our council tax base is a key part of our budget setting process. The numbers included in the report and that we forecasted are used to calculate how much council tax we will collect in the next financial year, 2019-20. Just for information, Chair, and for Cabinet, we've got over 110,000 properties across the city, and they are all valued for council tax purposes, and within a range of values which are from what is called Band A to Band H properties. The values of our properties across the city are, as you might expect, in the lower bands. We've got 51% of our properties are in Band A, and there's actually 86% of our properties in bands A, B and C. And what we have to do is, within the calculation, is equate all the bands to the fourth band, Band D, and as you might expect from us having a large proportion in the lower bands, the 110,000 properties that we have got actually reduced significantly to 68,679 equivalent Band D properties, and we use that figure to set our council tax figures for our budget setting purposes. What we need to do is let the two precepting authorities, should you agree that figure, we've got to let the police and the fire authorities know that figure so that they can actually set their council tax precepts, which we will collect for them. The one thing that is in the report, which is a positive, is is the fact that the council tax base has gone up by over 1,000 Band D properties. So the yield that we'll get from council tax next year is relatively more than we are getting this year. So the recommendations are as set out in paragraph 2, Chair.
Thank you. So it's a standard part of the process of budget setting. Any questions, queries, please? Okay, in that case, with recommendations 2.1 and 2.2, are they agreed, Cabinet? Yes? Agreed. Thank you. Oh, just for accuracy, Exec Scrutiny did consider this matter and resolved to note the report. So, we'll go to item 10. And this is a proposal to increase school places at Brackensdale Primary School. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is about a proposal to provide additional primary school places at Brackensdale Primary School to accommodate children moving into the new homes at the Kingsway. The proposal is to increase the school's admission number from 60 up to 75 from September 2019, with an additional 105 places available across the school on a phased basis, starting with the reception year group and then gradually moving through the school year by year until reaching all year groups. In terms of capital funding, the developers for the housing development have entered into a Section 106 agreement with the council to provide 1.9 million of funding to increase the accommodation at the school. Initial consultation have taken place, only 2 responses were received and both were in favour of the scheme, and in addition the head teacher and governing body fully support the proposal. So the recommendations are outlined at 2.1 and 2.2 in the report to essentially move to the next stage of the process.
Thank you. Exec Scrutiny resolved to recommend that Cabinet request officers to consider additional parking provision and the impact on the surrounding community of increased traffic in the preparation of detailed proposals for the further expansion of Brackensdale Primary School. I think we all, in all our wards, recognise the issues we have around school parking, and obviously it's relevant to this where the school's capacity is going to be increased, and I see no reason why we should not agree to that recommendation and suggest that it's likely that they need to include some details in their school travel plan. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to confirm that the car parking has and was considered as part of the school expansion design process, and this is included in the school travel plan. There's of course going to be pinch points for traffic at the start and end of school day, as it is, as you just said, in all our schools. The school is in regular communication with the parents to help manage traffic and encourage walking to the schools as outlined in the travel plan. Obviously, this is something that all schools need to keep on top of, and whenever we do have a new development, planning and school place planning work very closely together to make sure that this is now a standard part of the planning process, to make sure that we include things in the travel plans, to make sure that schools are continuing to talk with the parents and to make sure there are changes that can be made around the schools are made.
Thank you. I just like to ask, I'd like to know when this proposal was started to be worked on in relation to the approval of those homes in Kingsway.
Well, part of the work that we do in the council is when we know there are going to be new housing developments, part of the role of the council is to make sure that if there are homes being built in the city or very near to the city, that we've got enough places for children in our schools, both at primary and secondary age. And we do a lot of kind of strategic work and planning in relation to what developments are on the horizon and whether or not we've got enough places in the system. And I think we're pretty good in Derby at having that kind of forward view, looking over the horizon at both developments, but more importantly then, have we got enough places for children based on those developments, and also based on the fact that we're quite a young city with a rising birth rate and population. So the work would have started very early. And if we've got developments that are on the edge with the county, then we always do that work in collaboration with the county council as well.
Thank you, that's great to hear. I also have a couple of comments, if you don't mind me. So I'd like to just comment that we young people support the improvements to the walking route to encourage young people to walk to school, and we hope that those efforts to the same in other areas are given thorough thought. Now, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Owen Swift, Participation Pathway Manager. The primary purpose of the playing pitch strategy is to provide a strategic framework which ensures that the provision of outdoor sports meets the needs of existing and future demands. The playing pitch strategy is a sub-strategy of our overarching Move More Derby strategy, which is Derby's physical activity and sport strategy, adopted by the Council in 2018. The vision in 4.5 of the report is aligned to Move More Derby. The strategy covers the outdoor sports listed in 4.3 of the report. The headline findings for each of the sports are outlined in the tables in section 4.6 of the report, and the conclusions arising are stated in 4.7. In summary, there are current shortfalls existing for football, 3G pitches and rugby union. The future position projected to 2028 exacerbates these shortfalls with the addition of cricket. Based on these findings, there are 3 proposed overarching aims identified in 4.9 of the report: protect existing supply, enhance existing facilities via improved quality, and provide new facilities where there is current or future demand to do so. There is a need to protect all existing playing pitch provision until demand is met, but some shortfalls can be reduced through increased access to existing provision. The recommendations within the strategy and action plan should be scheduled for implementation over the next 10 years, and the framework recognises firm resources may not currently be in place to implement all of it. However, it provides a strategic justification to enable sources of external funding to be pursued. As stated in 5.3 of the report, it will be important to monitor the strategy and ensure it is kept robust and up to date. Therefore, there will be a 6-monthly review conducted. Finally, the Derby Growth Zone report provides details of the strategic housing sites within the growth zone of the existing outdoor sports provision. Scenarios are presented which present the additional demand for sports pitches generated from these housing developments in the growth zone. For example, the report shows that which housing sites, due to their size, are likely to generate demand for additional facilities in their own right. The increased demand for larger schemes in the Derby area of the growth zone is not sufficient to warrant the creation of new facilities. Therefore, contributions for off-site enhancements is the recommended way forward. However, some allocations in South Derbyshire may warrant new creation of pitches. This report seeks to approve and note the recommendations set out in paragraph 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've got 2 recommendations from exec scrutiny. The first one, that a ward-by-ward breakdown of playing pitch space was provided to local councillors to ensure surplus capacity was utilised to its full extent. And the second one, for Cabinet to recommend that officers consider the impact on surrounding communities, the need for additional supporting infrastructure, and the relationship with other local policies and strategies, particularly in regards to parking, when it's assessed their expansion or provision of additional playing pitches. Is that okay with you? You understand that and that's perfectly manageable? Yes, Councillor Barker.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'd just like to understand the rationale behind the first recommendation of the exec scrutiny. A ward-by-ward breakdown of playing pitch space provided to local councillors. I fail to understand how local councillors wouldn't know what pitch space is already on their patch. So I just fail to see why there's the necessity for that recommendation.
Yeah, good point. I wasn't through the rest of the meeting, but I think you were probably, Sarah, so you might be able to add to that.
In the most helpful way possible, Councillor Barker. The conversation was around the utilisation of those pitches. So obviously we would hope that all local members would know where their local sports pitches were in their area, but just to ensure that they are being used to the fullest extent, so to get an understanding of how many hours are played on each pitch by how many teams, for example, and if there was a lack of utilisation of that time for local councillors to help in the encouragement of using that time.
Okay, I think the second recommendation, I'll be with you in a second. I can fully understand that in regards to parking around the hubs, if you like. I well remember and often see the parking issues around the likes of the racecourse and other hubs on a Sunday morning when all the pitches are in use and stuff. So I think that's an entirely sensible recommendation. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just to welcome this, really, it's an interesting concept that we're now moving back out of a centralised one hub. I think it's very clear from the majority of local residents that people like to play in their areas locally, and we have areas across the city that have unutilised, well available, well suited, good parking facilities that need to be reinstated, and I can think of one in Spondon specifically, and I very much hope that we can work with not only the council officers here, but trying to encourage working with those football groups, and also the potential of voluntary sector and other local organisations within individual wards. And if we can just note that I think there's a lot of interest from various other locations, not just the Spondon.
In the absence of any other questions or comments, then... Oh, sorry, Councillor Skelton.
Thank you. Having read through the report, I noticed one thing wasn't mentioned at all. For pitches to actually be acceptable at an acceptable standard for playing league matches, they have to have changing rooms with them. It doesn't mention anything about the changing rooms and their standards in the report. I just wondered if that had actually been looked at.
You ask the officers if there's on that one.
And so the assessment that takes place is done on the actual playing pitches themselves as opposed to the ancillary facilities, because not all of the sports require the ancillary facilities. So the assessment isn't wholly done in terms of quality for the changing room provision that might take place. However, it is noted that on some sites there is changing facilities available, and throughout the consultation process in the assessment report, we have feedback from both the national governing bodies of those sports and the clubs that use those sites as well. So within that, there are comments around the actual quality and actually then how we can then work collectively with those groups to then think how we can upgrade those if need be.
Okay, so we can agree the recommendations from the exec scrutiny and recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 of the report. Okay, Cabinet? Yes? Thank you. Item 12 then is the Economic Growth Strategy Delivery Plan. Who's going to do that one? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This item is about the redrafting of an economic growth strategy. The last strategy was created in 2010, covering the period 2011 to 2017. The work that's been ongoing on this has involved quite a lot of detailed drawing together of data, analysing the data, doing some consultation. That consultation took place in April, May, and then we produced a draft delivery plan that was consulted through the Derby Renaissance Board in September period. So the report is seeking approval for principally the delivery plan and the 5 elements of the delivery plan, which are addressing the major findings of the strategy that had been produced earlier in the year.
Thank you. The exec scrutiny dealt with this matter, but resolved to note the report. Councillor Holmes, I think you want to say.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank officers and Alan for their sterling work on this report and the delivery plan. I know they've worked very hard on this, and it is a very important document moving forward. It underpins our vision. It's one of the first issues, actually, that the Cabinet looked at on taking administration, and it's good to see it now coming towards a full council. So because it's coming to full council, obviously I won't dwell on the detail of this. I think it's probably better to deal with it in that arena. But I would like to say just a couple of things. On page 6, for example, it recognises that the economic boundary of Derby is larger than the city, and that's something which we feel as an administration is extremely important moving forward. And we need that in our strategy and delivery plan, and it's good that it's there for obvious reasons, which we can probably expand on in the council debate. On page 10, for example, as well, we recognise within this strategy the city centre, the managed grow-on workspaces, and it's very interesting to see that develop as well, because I think that's going to underpin many schemes and many positive changes within the city centre as we transition away from sun retail into other areas to support the city centre. And on page 12, finally, Chair, and again, I'm not missing this. There's so much good stuff in this report, but I just wanted to highlight just 2 or 3 things. Again, on page 12, the city centre diversification and skilled workers plan as well. That's about reinvigorating the evening economy, new economic activities within the city centre, transformation of empty premises, reopening the assembly rooms, developing of live workspace, and reimagining uses of key assets, e.g. the Moghill. Absolutely massive foundations there for growth within the city, and making sure that this is a vibrant place to live, work and play. And so it cannot be underestimated how important this document is for our vision moving forward, Chair, and I'm very glad that it's here tonight for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions and comments? Yes. No.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. Probably keep the observations for the full council meeting. Just a question about the collaboration element, aiming to create a city with an outward-looking national and global trading partner. Just in that vein, has the work that was embarked upon previously with China and India been continued? Is that still going on? Can you give me any information about what's happening? And then just the second question. The apprenticeship levy is mentioned in here as well. I would be grateful if Shadow Cabinet could have a briefing on what's currently happening in terms of the apprenticeship levy, certainly from a council perspective, but any information that we might hold about what others in the city are doing with their apprenticeship levy funding, if we hold that information.
Thank you. On the first one, absolutely yes. I've highlighted it in my own portfolio as leader. International development has been critical to the way forward for the city. Yes, the work with China is continuing. Yes, the work with Japan is continuing. Yes, the work with India is continuing. And actually, your colleague, Councillor Shankar, is still leading on that on the city's behalf, because he's in a position to do so, well connected, and it's that significant for the city. So. Yes, in answer to your question, and we are raising the profile, hope to raise the profile of that in a number of ways. And the second part, I'll defer to Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. For whatever reason, Sarah, this now falls under my portfolio, apprenticeship levy. I've been meeting monthly on this and getting regular updates, and I'm working cohesively with Councillor Williams with the Derby Adult Learning Service to try and ensure that we've got the appropriate apprenticeships in the city for our own council. But yes, we did start off on rocky grounds. There has been little or no movement historically on the funding spend for this, and we've had to progress this as swiftly as possible. But we, like I think across the board, people are struggling to make sure that this is spent and up to date. In a meeting with Rolls-Royce today, we're planning to go along with them, to meet with them and their apprenticeship levy board to see what work we can do together to try and incorporate how they can help us and we can help them on the strategy going forward. But absolutely would more than happily involve you in terms of a briefing update and any ideas you can bring to the table. Thank you.
And an important part of the work to link in with a number of other strategies and position Derby in the East Midlands engine, as we like to call it, or I like to call it. So we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. We can agree those, Cabinet? Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mentioned that. Item 13 then is the compulsory acquisition of empty homes. I presume Ian, for you, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report seeks authorisation for the acquisition or the compulsory purchase of 4 empty properties. All of the properties have been empty for at least 3.5 years. One of them has been empty for almost 10 years. They represent a real waste of a valuable housing resource at a time when it's well publicised that housing is in short supply both locally and nationally. The exact addresses of these properties are in the confidential part of the agenda today, as we obviously don't want to promote and publicise where empty properties are actually standing in the city. Our previous experience suggests that once we have authorisation from members, probably only 1 or 2 of these properties will actually be CPO'd, and the fact that there's a cabinet resolution will probably persuade 2 or 3 of the other owners to bring these properties back into use under their own measures. Looking at them, I think if we were to acquire any or all of the 4, that probably we would look to keep them all within the council's own stock rather than the alternative, which is to sell them at auction. And the recommendations, Chair, are laid out in 2.1 to 2.4.
Okay, well, I think it's a policy we've previously and will continue to support, hopefully to avoid the position where homes have been empty for 10 years. We need to try and get on top of that. Any other comments? And yes, sir.
Just to say that obviously I very much support these proposals as well, and particularly happy to hear, Ian, that they'll be kept in council stock as social housing, which I think is superbly positive, and perhaps could be considered to be our default position as a council from now on, as opposed to buying and then selling due to the lack of affordable housing that we know we've got in the city.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree, Sarah. Obviously, in an ideal situation, we can use the HRA to ensure that we've increased our number of affordable housing or council housing availability to those in need. And I think if Councillor Webb was here today, he would very much thank the individuals that are doing this work. It's progressing really nicely. They're getting into a nice routine of how to move things forward quickly and efficiently to try and encourage those as fast into the local opportunity for people to have those houses going forward. So thank you very much.
So the actual locations and the addresses of the properties are dealt with later on, I think, at item 19, but subject to that, are we okay to agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.4, is it? Yep. Okay, agreed. I would just, for complete this scrutiny board, resolve to note the report on that one. So item 14, which probably will be equally welcomed, is the purchase of residential development to provide 14 new affordable homes. Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you just said, we've got the opportunity to buy 14 new homes. They're made up of 6 two-bed apartments, 6 three-bed houses, and 2 5-bed houses. They will help us meet housing needs, affordable housing needs in the city, and in particular the 2 5-bed houses will be very welcome. As members will be aware, we've got a real shortage in our own stock of 5-bed houses, and indeed it's households waiting for houses of that size that wait by far the longest period of time on our housing waiting lists. We think the proposal represents good value for money for the council to invest in, and by spending both a mixture of the council's right to buy receipts and our own HRA investment, we reduce the likelihood of having to return unspent right to buy receipts to the government.
Thank you. So exec scrutiny resolved to note the report. Are there any questions? Yes, Sarah?
At the risk of agreement breaking out across the chamber, no, we've got a great leader. I welcome this, particularly as it's in my ward. As Ian said, the 5-bed houses are going to be big. I mean, we need so many more. So any more you can source, Ian, go for it. But yeah, I think it's good news. Shame we can only attribute 30% of right to buy receipts though. National issue, won't go into it, but good news.
Just to follow on from that, really, I think this administration has overseen 2 decisions. This is the second like this. The first one was the acquisition of Hackwood Farm housing for mobility conversion and those with mobility issues, and I think that was very welcome, and this follows on from that, and I think everybody across the chamber would like to see more of this, and I'd like to personally thank officers for their work, and we want to see more of this come forward. I think it's a very good move for the city, and you know, it's something which you get cross-party support on, which is very rare.
Yes, indeed. This is very welcome. As has previously been said, this is not the first time we've been able to buy a number of houses together in order to improve our stock of social housing, and particularly where there's particular shortage areas, accommodation suitable for those who are disabled in some way or other, or for larger families as well. And I think we perhaps need to do our best to concentrate on trying to get those sort of shortage type properties, more of them, so we can actually address things like 170 families waiting for a 4 or 5 bedroomed house. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? In that case, can we agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.3? Yes? Agreed. Item 15 then is a third one, allocation of grant to the War Memorial Village Trust.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the War Memorial Village Trust down at the southern end of the city. They've got around 50 homes currently on the site. These homes primarily for ex-service people and ex-emergency service people, particularly those who have disabilities and need mobility accommodation. This particular proposal is that the War Memorial Village Trust are going to demolish 6 homes, 4 of which have been empty now for quite some time because they're just out of date and no longer really fit for purpose, and 2 additional bungalows that again are on very, very large plots and don't make best use of the land that is available there. The proposal is that the council provides the War Memorial Trust with £300,000. The exact figure has still to be determined, but that is the most that we think we will have to give. And in exchange for that, the council will receive nominations to the 9 new bungalows that will all be accessible for people with disabilities that are going to be constructed on the site. And again, as members will be aware, fully adapted bungalows are in short supply in the city, particularly brand new ones. And we, again, think this represents very good value for money for the council. For £300,000, we will get nomination rights to 9 properties, and that's obviously far cheaper than if the council were to build 9 bungalows itself. As with the previous report, Chair, by spending this money, which is right to buy receipts, it significantly reduces the likelihood of us having to hand right to buy receipts back to government in the future.
Thank you, which we obviously would welcome. And the Exec Scrutiny Board looked at this and resolved to note the report. Comments or questions, please? Yes, Councillor Skelton.
Just a query about, obviously, the council will be having nomination rights. Is that sort of forever and a day, or is there a time limit on that?
Yes, Chair, it's the exact details have been still to be determined, but the War Memorial Village Trust are going to be home finder partners, so the presumption will be that we will get them in perpetuity. There will be a clause in the grant agreement which will say that these have to be retained as affordable housing, so we will be safeguarded in that way, Chair.
Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Again, fantastic work in terms of this, but I think it would be right to say that it's a very good project from the War Memorial Village Trust themselves, and thank you to them, as well as the Council, to collaboratively working towards a positive move for the city. And again, Councillor Webb would be thanking you profusely, I'm sure. Thank you.
Never say never.
In those circumstances, my only comment is that having met with the trustees again very recently over this, they have some absolutely very ambitious plans to upgrade the stock on this very welcoming area. It's a fantastic initiative to take these 6 properties down and replace them with 9 well-proportioned and well-useful bungalows. They have some ambitious plans, as I say, not just in relation to the housing stock, but the public realm of the area and in some other ways. So I'd like to welcome and thank them for their initiative here, and we'll do what we can to support them in further developments. So, if there's no other comments, we'll look at recommendations 3.1 to 3.2. We can agree those? 2.1, 2.2. Oh, sorry, 2.1, 2.2. I'm looking at the wrong bit, yes. Okay, thank you. So item 16 then is the corporate safeguarding policy. Andy, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Safeguarding is an area of business elected members and the wider council take very seriously. In 2015, Cabinet approved a corporate safeguarding policy which sets out our commitments and roles in the delivery of our safeguarding responsibilities. The policy has recently been updated to reflect changes which are summarised at 4.3 of the covering report, and the updated policy is Appendix 1 of the pack. There isn't a statutory requirement to have a corporate safeguarding policy, but it's good practice to do so. So the report recommends to Cabinet to approve the updated corporate safeguarding policy as set out in Appendix 1.
Thank you. Executive Scrutiny resolved to note the report. Any other comments or questions or agreements? Oh, Sarah, thank you.
Well, yes, of course I agree. It's safeguarding. It's really important. I don't know. I hope so. Last night, I would have asked questions about this at Exec Scrutiny, but the chair went a bit crackers and just raced through a load of stuff while I was at the loo. So it just went a bit daft. But just one couple of queries on the actual document itself. Appendix 1 at 4.2, under the Chief Exec's role, it talks about Section 11 duties. Now, I'm presuming that means Section 11 of the Children's Act. Is that right? And could we maybe just put that in? Because I don't know if people might not...
It's Section 11 of the 2004 Children's Act, so yeah, we can put that in.
Yeah, just being a bit pedantic. as you know, I am under. And at 11.1, I did mention this to Andy in the corridor last night, but it talks about information being set out in the council's political conventions. Now, I don't know what that means or is. I've absolutely no idea. Did you get anything about that, Andy?
Yeah, just to try and clarify, and I think what we can do is probably either change the wording or put a little asterisk that explains it, but essentially it's referring to things I talked about last night on the corridor, really, around the council's code of conduct, Nolan principles, the kind of expectations on members when they are elected to the council around safeguarding training, corporate parenting, those type of things. But I think it's a fair comment, and I think that subject to Cabinet agreeing the policy, we can just put a little asterisk in just to explain that in a bit more detail.
I just thought it was worthwhile as well, if it's a public-facing document, that people could understand it in its entirety, that was all. But yes, fine.
Mr. Skelton?
Just to be helpful on that same point, it obviously has got political conventions with starting with capital letters. Had it just been lowercase letters, it might not have caused the same confusion, but as thinking that it's something, a formal document, whereas actually, obviously, it's now been explained. It's a number of things. So yeah, I think lowercase and an asterisk and explanation would be very helpful.
That takes us to item 17, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out how we've got some additional funding from government to help us fund winter pressures in our adult social care service. The recommendation in the report is that the delegation for the spending of that funding is to the Director of People Services in consultation with myself and Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, Councillor Skelton?
Right, well, extra money for social care is always welcome. It's still a great pity that nationally we still haven't got a proper system for funding adult social care, and it looks like we're still not going to get one for quite some time. I think anything this council can do via the LGA to put more pressure on the government to get its finger out would be very helpful.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously welcome any funding coming to the council of any description from central government, because it is an ever diminishing pot. And I know both Councillor Webb and Councillor Williams have written to ministers to lobby them on these funding issues for people's services. So I would just encourage that. But also, Don, just be careful, because you might upset Councillor Webb. You need to consult him, not Councillor Williams.
At risk of upsetting somebody, I was going to recommend that we write to the Minister and to the Chancellor and thank them very much for the money that they've given us, but I'm sensing that might not get full agreement across the Council, so, and through the Cabinet. So we'll stick with the recommendation as is then, which is on corporate scrutiny, resolved to note the report. And the recommendation that we're approving is 2.1 on item 17. So, sorry, Councillor Skelton.
One quick little point. This extra money, is it actually going to be rolled into the base budget, or is it then it's just a one-off, it's not going to recur at all? We might like to ask for it to be put into the base budget.
Yeah, we'll be. This is a one-off pot of money that we will be using to help us balance our base budgets, but unfortunately, it's just a one-off. We're relying on the green paper that you've just referenced there for adult social care to put a permanent fix in the medium to long term. But this is one-off funding.
Yeah, I think joking apart though, the LGA conference was a two-topic conference. It was about children's and adult services. We've written to them, we've lobbied them whenever we've bumped into the ministers. I don't think there's any doubt that the government knows about the issue. It's extremely disappointing that it's not been resolved as yet, and Brexit has had that effect in terms of all government legislation, I think, and they need to get over that and get on with it. But that will continue, and hopefully the government will recognise it and move towards resolving some of the problems that we have to deal with on a regular basis. So, recommendation 2.1, can we agree? Yeah?
Agreed.
Okay, so item 18 is the exclusion of the press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item. That under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they will involve unlikely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 and 5 of part 1 of the schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Oh, everybody's gone. Agreed?